The wheat fields of Haven 3 stretched golden under twin suns when the shadow fell across them. 300 warships blocked out the light, hanging in the sky like a promise of death. Governor Ruth Barnes looked up from her work, soil still clinging to her fingers, and watched the armada take position above her world. 80,000 people called this place home. Farmers, miners, families who had traveled across the stars to build something simple and good. Now death had followed them. The broadcast came on every frequency, every screen, every device that could receive a signal. People of Haven 3, the voice said. It belonged to High Prelate Sovan of the Varek Dominion. His species had conquered 47 worlds. They had never lost a war. You have 6 hours to surrender unconditionally. Resistance will result in complete annihilation. This is not a negotiation. Ruth wiped her hands on her work clothes and walked toward the converted barn that served as their government building. People were already gathering, their faces showing the fear she felt in her own chest. But fear was just a feeling. It did not have to become an action. The colony council assembled in the barn. 12 people who had been elected to manage water rights and harvest schedules now faced a decision that would determine if their people lived or died. 300 ships, said old Gwen, who ran the bakery and had once been a Marine decades ago. We have no military. No weapons worth mentioning. No chance. They want slaves, said Danny, their young communications officer. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. I intercepted their secondary transmissions. They plan to take us regardless of what we choose. Surrender just means we go quietly. Ruth looked around the table at her council, at farmers and teachers and engineers, at people who had never held a weapon in their lives, and people who had put weapons down hoping never to hold them again. Then the choice is simple, she said. We can die on our knees, or we can die on our feet. I know which one I prefer. There might be another option, Danny said. 3 days ago, when their fleet first appeared on long-range scanners, I sent a distress beacon. I did not tell anyone because I did not want to create false hope, but I sent it to Outpost 7. The council went quiet. Outpost 7 was a rumor, a whisper, a military garrison that supposedly did not exist, placed in this sector to protect human interests that Earth did not officially acknowledge. Did they respond? Ruth asked. No, Danny admitted. But the beacon was received. I confirmed that much. Ruth stood and walked to the window. Outside, colonists were gathering, looking up at the ships that had come to take their lives or their freedom. Children held their parents' hands. Elderly couples stood together. Young people who had their whole lives ahead of them stared at the sky with defiance in their eyes. We vote, Ruth said. All in favor of surrender, raise your hand. No hands rose. All in favor of telling the Varek exactly what they can do with their ultimatum. 12 hands went up. Even Danny, whose hands still shook, raised his arm high. Ruth activated the colony's broadcast system. Her voice would reach every home, every field, every mine. It would also reach the Varek fleet, because she wanted them to hear this too. This is Governor Ruth Barnes of Haven 3. To our people, I say this. We did not cross the stars to become slaves. We did not build this world with our own hands just to hand it over to those who want to take it. Whatever comes next, we face it together. She paused, then looked directly at the screen that showed High Prelate Sovan's flagship. To the Varek Dominion, I have a response to your ultimatum. She said one word, no, and then the entire council chamber erupted in laughter. Not the laughter of madness or despair. The laughter of people who had made their choice and felt free because of it. The laughter of humans who refused to break. The transmission ended. High Prelate Sovan stared at his screen in confusion. In 47 conquered worlds, no one had ever laughed at him. No one had ever said no. He gave the order for his fleet to charge weapons. But before the firing sequence could complete, something impossible appeared on his sensors that a ripple in subspace. Ships coming out of faster-than-light travel. Only 12 of them, which should have been meaningless against 300. But they were human ships, and humans, Sovan was about to learn, did not know how to stay down. Danny's console lit up with an incoming transmission. He looked at Ruth with tears in his eyes. Governor, he said. Outpost 7 answered. They are here. Ruth looked out the window at the sky full of enemies and the tiny sparks of light that represented hope. Then let us show our guests how humans say hello, she said. Outside, the golden wheat swayed in the wind, and somewhere above, The battle for Haven 3 was about to begin. 12 ships against 300 should not have been a fight. It should have been a slaughter. High Prelate Sovan watched the human vessels drop out of subspace and felt nothing but amusement. His fleet had crushed armadas 10 times this size. These tiny frigates, patched and scarred and clearly held together by willpower more than engineering, posed no threat whatsoever. Do not waste ammunition on them, he ordered his commanders. Let the forward cruisers handle this insult. The human fleet spread into formation above Haven 3. They were fast, Sovan noticed. Faster than Varric ships. But speed meant nothing when you were so badly outnumbered on the colony's surface. Ruth and her council watched the sky through the barn's windows. Danny had his equipment running, intercepting every signal he could find. Their commander is hailing us, Danny said. Ruth activated the screen. A woman's face appeared. Dark skin, gray hair cut short, eyes that had seen too many battles but still held humor in them. Governor Barnes, the woman said, I am Commander Adissa of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your invitation. Hope you do not mind, we brought party favors. Ruth actually smiled. Commander, you have 12 ships. They have 300. I know, Adissa replied. Almost feels unfair for them. The transmission cut as the Varric opened fire. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The human frigates did not fight like normal ships. They did not form lines or exchange broadsides. They moved like predators, using Haven 3's 3 moons as cover, appearing and disappearing, striking and vanishing. Commander Adissa's ship, the Defiant, led the dance. She pushed her engines beyond their safety limits, pulled maneuvers that should have torn her vessel apart, and trusted her crew to perform miracles. They did. The first Varric cruiser exploded when 2 frigates hit it from opposite angles, their weapons targeting the exact same spot on its shields. The shields failed in a cascade, and the hull followed. Sovan stopped smiling. Concentrate fire, he ordered. Destroy them one at a time. But the humans would not stay still long enough to be targeted. They used everything around them as weapons. Mining equipment left in orbit became debris fields. Communication satellites became decoys. One frigate captain actually rammed his ship through a Varric formation and somehow survived. In the first hour, 11 Varric ships were destroyed. 2 human frigates took heavy damage but remained functional. On the surface, the colonists watched the lights in the sky with hope they had not felt since the ultimatum. Ruth coordinated with Danny, who fed targeting information to the fleet using the colony's deep space communication array. They are buying us time, Ruth said. We need to use it. She gathered the colonists in the central square. Farmers and miners and teachers and children. Everyone who could hold a tool or operate machinery. The Varric will send ground forces, she told them. They will try to take hostages to force the fleet to stand down. We cannot let that happen. Gwen stepped forward, her old Marine training showing in how she held herself. I can teach anyone who is willing to fight. We have mining explosives. We have farming equipment. We have knowledge of this land that they do not. We are not soldiers, someone said from the crowd. No, Ruth agreed. We are something more dangerous. We are people defending our home. Above them, Commander Adissa continued her impossible battle. Her frigates were taking damage now. Systems failing. Crews injured. But every hour they held meant another hour for the real fleet to arrive. Sovan received a report from his intelligence officers and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Uncertainty. High Prelate, his second said, we have detected transmissions indicating a larger human force is en route. 47 warships. They will arrive in approximately 46 hours. Impossible, Sovan said. Humans do not have such strength in this sector. The evidence suggests otherwise. Sovan looked at his tactical display. 11 ships lost to 12 inferior vessels. A colony that refused to surrender. Reinforcements coming that could actually threaten his fleet. For the first time in his career, he considered retreat. Then he looked at the recording of Governor Barnes saying no and laughing at him. His pride burned hotter than his tactical sense. We destroy them before reinforcements arrive, he decided. All ships advance. I want that colony in ashes and those frigates scattered across space. Commander Adissa saw the Varric fleet begin to move as one massive force. She opened a channel to her surviving ships. They are committing everything, she said. Good. That means we scared them. Now we just have to scare them for 46 more hours. Anyone want to go home early? Her captains responded with laughter. And in that laughter, Sovan heard something that troubled him deeply. These humans were not afraid. They were outgunned, outnumbered, facing certain death, and they were laughing. What kind of species laughed at death? He was about to find out. The first Varek landing craft came down at dawn, their dark shapes cutting through clouds painted orange by the twin suns. Gwen watched them from behind a grain silo she had spent all night converting into a bunker. 67 years old, retired Marine, baker of bread and trainer of soldiers. The colonists around her were terrified. Good. Fear kept you alive if you did not let it freeze you. Remember, she told them, they expect farmers. Let us give them a surprise. The Varek ground commander, a warrior named Torval, deployed his troops with practiced efficiency. 800 soldiers against unarmed colonists. This would be quick. Then the irrigation system exploded. Ruth had designed the trap herself. Water pipes that had fed the wheat fields for years were now filled with mining explosives. When the first Varek squad crossed into the settlement's outer ring, the ground erupted beneath them. Torval lost 30 soldiers in 10 seconds. He ordered his troops to spread out, to advance carefully. That was when the tractors came. Danny had worked through the night with the colony's engineers, fitting armor plating to the heavy farming equipment. The machines were not fast, but they did not need to be. They created chaos, forcing the Varek to scatter, breaking their formations to IN orbit. Commander Adissa watched the ground battle while fighting her own. She had lost another frigate, leaving only 9 ships against nearly 300. But the Varek had paid dearly for every human vessel destroyed. 23 enemy ships confirmed destroyed, her tactical officer reported. 2 more heavily damaged. Not enough, Adissa said. We need to make them bleed more. She ordered her remaining ships to fall back toward Haven 3's largest moon. The Varek fleet followed, eager to finish the engagement. They did not notice the cargo shuttles hiding in the moon's shadow until it was too late. The shuttles were not warships. They were transport vessels that the colony used for moving ore. But Danny had modified their sensors to feed targeting data to Adissa's frigates. And in the close quarters around the moon, that information was worth more than weapons. Varek ships began taking hits from angles they never expected. 7 more vessels fell before Sovan pulled his fleet back to regroup. On the ground, Gwen held the line. Her defenders had pushed the Varek back 3 times, using their knowledge of the land against superior numbers and training. They are bringing heavier weapons, Danny warned over the communication system. Artillery. They will level the buildings. Then we do not stay in buildings, Gwen replied. She ordered the colonists into the tunnel network beneath the settlement. Mining tunnels, maintenance passages, natural caves that had been discovered during construction. The Varek could not shell what they could not find. Ruth coordinated everything from the converted barn. She had refused to go underground with the others. Someone needs to stay visible, she said when Danny argued. They need to think we are still here. They will kill you. Maybe. But if they think the leadership is in this barn, they will not bomb the rest of the settlement. Danny stared at her. That is insane. That is leadership. Sovan received reports from Torval about the ground situation. Losses were mounting. The colonists fought like trapped animals, using every piece of their world as a weapon. Worse, the human fleet refused to die. High Prelate, his intelligence officer, said, the human reinforcements will arrive in 34 hours. At our current rate of losses, we will still outnumber them significantly, but the battle will be costly. Sovan thought about what waited for him if he returned to the Dominion with anything less than total victory. His career would end. His family would be disgraced. Everything he had built over centuries of conquest would crumble. We have 34 hours, he said. We use them. He ordered Torval to escalate. No more careful advances. No more measured responses. Overwhelm them with numbers, break their defenses, take hostages from the survivors. Use them to force the fleet to stand down. Torval acknowledged and gathered his remaining forces for a final push. Gwen felt the change in the Varek assault. They were no longer probing. They were charging, wave after wave, accepting losses that would have made any other army retreat. They are desperate, she realized. That makes them dangerous. She rallied her defenders, but they were exhausted. Ammunition was running low. People who had never fought before were reaching their limits. Then a Varek soldier broke through and raised his weapon at a young mother holding her child. Gwen shot him with a weapon she had taken from the first wave of attackers. The mother ran. Gwen covered her retreat. Fall back to the secondary tunnels. Gwen ordered. Everyone. Now. As she retreated, she looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, Commander Odessa was fighting with everything she had. Somewhere out there, 47 warships were racing toward Haven 3. They just had to hold a little longer. They just had to survive. 6 frigates remained. 6 out of 12, battered and bleeding light from 100 wounds in their hulls. Commander Odessa stood on her bridge, surrounded by sparking consoles and exhausted officers. Ammunition status? She asked. 17% on primary weapons. 8% on secondaries. Not enough. Not nearly enough. On the surface, things were worse. Gwen had been wounded during a Varek assault, a piece of debris cutting deep into her shoulder. She refused to stop fighting, tying her arm in a sling and continuing to coordinate the defense with one hand. The Varek had pushed into the settlement's outer districts. Buildings that colonists had built with their own hands were now burning. Ruth remained in the barn, broadcasting encouragement to her people while Danny worked desperately to maintain communication with the fleet. They cannot take much more, Danny said quietly, looking at the reports coming from the tunnels. We are running out of everything. Ruth nodded. She had known this moment would come. The moment when hope began to die. She activated the colony-wide broadcast one more time. This is your governor, she said. I know you are tired. I know you are scared. I know many of you think we cannot win this fight. Maybe you are right. But I want you to understand something. They came here expecting us to surrender. They came here expecting us to break. That is not something we know how to do. So whatever happens next, hold your heads high. We faced an empire, and we did not bow. In a tunnel beneath the settlement, a 12-year-old girl named Sophie listened to the broadcast while her mother reloaded an improvised weapon. They had been hiding for hours, hearing the sounds of battle echo through the stone. Mom, Sophie asked, are we going to be okay? Her mother looked at her, looked at the fear in her daughter's eyes, looked at the weapon in her own hands. She thought about lying. She thought about telling the truth. We are going to survive, she said, because that is what humans do. It was not quite an answer, but it was enough. High Prelate Sovan had lost patience entirely. Nearly 50 ships destroyed by an inferior force. Ground troops struggling against farmers. His reputation crumbling with every hour that passed. Orbital bombardment, he ordered. Target the settlement. His officers hesitated. High Prelate, our ground forces are still engaged. We will hit our own troops. Then tell them to retreat. I want that colony erased. The orders went out. Varek soldiers began pulling back, leaving the colonists confused and relieved. Then they looked up and saw the weapons charging on the ships above. Commander Odessa saw the bombardment sequence beginning. She understood what was happening. Sovan had decided that if he could not conquer, he would destroy. All ships, she broadcast to her surviving frigates. Move to intercept position between the fleet and the planet. Commander, her first officer said, we cannot survive a direct engagement with the entire fleet. I know. She positioned her 6 remaining vessels in a defensive line above Haven 3. 6 ships against hundreds. They would buy minutes at most. But minutes might be enough. The first bombardment shots fell. 3 struck the planet's surface before Odysseus' frigates could intercept. 3 explosions that turned homes and fields and dreams into fire. Then the human ships began taking the shots themselves, shields failing. Hulls cracking. Crews dying. On the ground, Ruth watched the sky light up with explosions. She watched human ships die to protect her world. She watched and felt tears running down her face. They are sacrificing themselves, Danny whispered. They are buying time, Ruth replied. Do not waste it. Then Danny's console began screaming in alert. His eyes went wide. Governor, he said, his voice breaking. Governor, you need to see this. Ruth looked at the screen, looked at the sensor readings, looked at the ships dropping out of subspace. 47 of them. Human warships. Real warships, not patched-together frigates. At their center, a vessel so large it seemed impossible. The dreadnought unconquered. A voice came across all frequencies. Calm. Measured. Absolutely certain. Varek Fleet, this is Admiral Foster of the United Earth Defense Force. You demanded surrender. We have a counteroffer. Ruth started laughing. She could not help it. After everything, After all the darkness, the cavalry had arrived, and they had brought the biggest guns humanity had ever built. Sovan stared at his tactical display and felt something he had never experienced in his long career of conquest. Fear, real, genuine, paralyzing fear. The humans had come, and they were not here to negotiate. Admiral Foster had gray hair, steady hands, and eyes that showed no mercy. She had served humanity for 40 years, fighting wars that never made the news, protecting colonies that officially did not exist. Now she stood on the bridge of the Unconquered and looked at the Varric fleet. Tactical assessment, she said. 247 enemy vessels remaining. Significant damage across their formation. Their commander has positioned his flagship at the center of the fleet. Coward formation, Foster observed. He is hiding behind his own ships. Typical. She opened a channel to her fleet. 47 warships, each one built for this exact moment. Each one crewed by humans who had trained for years to face exactly this kind of enemy. All ships, this is Foster. Execute the hammer. The hammer was a tactic developed specifically for fighting the Varric. Human intelligence had spent decades studying Dominion shield technology, learning its weaknesses, finding the frequencies that could crack it open. The result was a synchronized weapons barrage that hit every Varric ship at the exact same moment. At the exact same shield frequency point, 247 Varric ships shuddered as their shields flickered and failed simultaneously. Then the human fleet opened fire. High Prelate Sovan watched his tactical display turn red. Ships vanishing. Signals going dark. Warriors who had never known defeat dying in the cold of space. How, he demanded. They are outnumbered nearly 6-1. His tactical officer was shaking. Their weapons are more advanced than our intelligence suggested. Their tactics are designed specifically to counter our defenses. They have been preparing for this fight. Because humans remembered every enemy, every defeat, every loss. They had been watching the Varric Dominion for generations, learning their patterns, developing their counters. Waiting for the day when the Dominion finally came for a human world. That day had arrived. And so had the response. Commander Adissa watched the battle from her crippled frigate. She had lost 2 more ships during the bombardment, leaving only 4 functional vessels. But her crews were alive, and now they could see the fleet that had come to finish what they started. All frigate captains, she broadcast, form up on my position. We are joining the main fleet. Her ships limped toward Foster's formation. Wounded, broken, barely flying. But still in the fight. On the ground, the Varric ground forces received an order to retreat to their landing craft. They tried to obey, but the colonists had other ideas. Gwen, her arm still in a sling, led a group of defenders to cut off the Varric retreat. They used mining tunnels to get ahead of the enemy, emerging from the ground like vengeful ghosts. You wanted our world, Gwen shouted at the Varric soldiers. You can have 6 feet of it. The fighting was brutal but brief. The Varric had been retreating, not prepared for an ambush. When it was over, 63 enemy soldiers had surrendered. Among them was Ground Commander Torval himself. Ruth received word of the capture and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Then she returned to watching the sky. The battle above was becoming a massacre. Human ships moved through the Varric fleet like predators through prey. The Unconquered alone had destroyed 30 enemy vessels, its weapons cutting through hulls that had never known defeat. Sovan's flagship took a direct hit. Then another. His shield officer reported catastrophic failure across all systems. High Prelate, his second said, we must retreat. The battle is lost. The Dominion does not retreat, Sovan growled. Then the Dominion will die here. Sovan looked at his tactical display. Half his fleet was already gone. The humans were not just winning. They were erasing everything he had built. That he thought about surrender. Thought about the shame it would bring. Thought about facing the Dominion High Council as a failure. No. He would not live with that disgrace. All ships, he broadcast, concentrate fire on the human flagship. If we are to die, we take their admiral with us. The surviving Varric vessels turned toward the Unconquered. A final desperate charge. A last act of defiance. Admiral Foster saw them coming. She smiled. They want to die like warriors, she said. Let us grant their wish. The Unconquered did not retreat, did not evade. Foster flew her dreadnought straight at the enemy charge, her weapons blazing, her shields absorbing hit after hit. When Sovan's flagship finally exploded, Torn apart by concentrated human fire, he was still ordering his crew to fight. He died as he had lived, refusing to accept defeat until defeat consumed him. Danny intercepted a transmission from the remaining Varric ships. A message sent toward Dominion space. "What does it say?" Ruth asked. Danny's face was pale. "It is a warning." Sovan's last words. "He is telling them they made a terrible mistake. He is telling them the humans are coming." Ruth looked at the sky, now filled with debris from a destroyed fleet. "He was right," she said. "We are." 61 Varric ships limped away toward Dominion space. 239 would never leave. Their wreckage filled the sky above Haven 3, a graveyard of conquest visible even in daylight. Admiral Foster's shuttle touched down outside the converted barn 3 hours after the battle ended. She stepped onto Haven 3 soil and looked around at the damaged buildings, the burned fields, the exhausted colonists emerging from their hiding places. Governor Ruth Barnes walked to meet her, still wearing farm clothes, still with dirt under her fingernails, looking exactly like someone who had stared death in the face and told it to wait. "Admiral," Ruth said, "thank you for coming." Foster looked at this woman, this farmer who had held a world together through impossible odds. "Governor," Foster replied, "thank you for holding. Your distress beacon gave us time to mobilize. Your stubbornness gave us something worth saving." Around them, colonists were emerging from tunnels and bunkers and hidden places, dirty and exhausted and wounded. Alive, they gathered in the central square, looking at the sky, looking at each other, slowly accepting that they had survived. Sophie found her mother among the crowd. The girl was crying, not from fear anymore, but from relief. Her mother held her close and whispered words that did not matter. What mattered was that they could still hold each other. "Mom," Sophie asked finally, "why did we not just surrender? It would have been easier." Her mother looked up at the debris-filled sky, at the burned fields that would grow again, at the damaged homes that would be rebuilt. "Because we are human," she said. "Surrendering is not something we know how to do." Danny found Gwen at the makeshift medical station. Her shoulder was being treated properly now, the wound that she had ignored during the battle finally getting attention. "You should have told us you were hurt that badly," Danny said. "Would it have changed anything?" Gwen asked. "No. Then why waste words on it?" She smiled through the pain. "Besides, I have bread to bake. The ovens should still work. People need to eat." That was Gwen. Fight all night, nearly bleed out, then immediately start thinking about bread. Admiral Foster met with Ruth in the barn to discuss what came next. The Dominion would not forget what had happened here. They would want revenge, or at least answers. "They will send diplomats before they send soldiers," Foster predicted. What happened here scared them. They have never lost a fleet this badly. They need to understand what they are dealing with before they risk another war. "And what are they dealing with?" Ruth asked. Foster looked at her seriously. "A species that refuses to break. A species that laughs at ultimatums. A species that would rather die on their feet than live on their knees." They called this sector empty. They thought they could take what they wanted without consequence. Now they know better. 3 weeks later, Haven 3 held a memorial for those who had died in the battle. 17 colonists, 212 military personnel from the original frigate squadron and the main fleet. Their names were carved into stone in the central square, beneath words that Ruth had chosen herself. "They came to take our home." They learned what that costs. 6 months after the battle, a Dominion diplomatic vessel entered human space for the first time in history. They came with terms of peace, trade agreements, and a new word they had learned to say in human languages: respect. The ambassador met with Ruth on Haven 3. She insisted on it. The galaxy needed to see that the woman who had said no to an empire was still standing on the world she had refused to surrender. "We underestimated your species," the ambassador said. "Everyone does," Ruth replied. "At first. Why did you not surrender? You had nothing. No fleet. No weapons. No chance." Ruth thought about the question. Thought about the wheat fields she had been working in when the shadow fell. Thought about the people who had trusted her to lead them through the impossible. "Because surrender was never really an option," she finally said. "You offered us slavery or death. We chose neither. We chose to fight for a third option you did not consider." "And what option was that?" Ruth smiled the same smile she had worn when she sent her response to the ultimatum. "Victory." The ambassador left Haven 3 with a report that would change Dominion policy forever. The humans were not weak. They were not primitive. They were a species forged in the fires of a death world, tempered by countless wars against each other and their environment, and absolutely unwilling to submit to anyone or anything. The Dominion had conquered 47 worlds. They would not conquer a 48th, because the 48th had been human, and humans, the galaxy was learning, did not know how to lose.